Hey, what's up, everybody? Hope you guys can hear me. Can you guys hear me? Let me know if you can hear me, because I normally do this on Twitch, and I'm doing this on YouTube, and one of the reasons why... Yep, okay, sweet. So, one of the reasons why is because it made me re-log in and do all this crap, and so that's why it was taking me a little bit. That's why we had the 10-minute there little intermission to get it started, because I had to get all the technical stuff worked out. So here's what we're going to be doing. All right, and I'm getting the session up right now. I've got a couple of the elite drivers are going to be joining me, I believe, and we're going to be covering all the cars in this session. Now, that being said, I want to let you know kind of what to expect. The wing sprint cars are obviously going to take up the bulk of the time, because that's what everybody drives. Out of everybody who's going to watch this, 85% are going to be winged sprint car drivers. I'm not going to cover 305s. For those of you who run open setups in 305s, if you take a 360 setup and you put it on a 305 and you change the gear, you're good. Okay, so everything you learn that's applicable on the 360 can be applied to a 305. For the vast majority of stuff, everything that you're going to learn in terms of, if you hear me talking about wing sprint car stuff, understand that it's interchangeable between the 360s and the 410s. The only differences, and we'll cover this when we talk about corner weights and stuff like that, are minor and slight at best, okay? We will cover the non-wing sprint cars. I will give you guys, I have a file that I'm going to be putting up. I'll be putting the link in the chat. If you are watching the recording of this, it will be in the description. Also, you guys could probably, and I've got myself deafened here in the voice channel, so let me fix that. You guys, what was I saying? Dang it. Oh yeah, so it'll be down in the description. It will be a zipped file, okay? I'm gonna show you guys what the stuff looks like. I'm gonna go over everything, because there's a lot of stuff I'm giving you, and then you're gonna basically want to just kind of go through yourself. If you gotta watch the recording over and over, do that. I don't want it to I don't want this to take forever for you. But the reason why I'm not going to give the stuff to you now and then go over it with you is because we'll spend more time talking about the setup matrix for the UMP mod than we would on actually getting stuff done. So that's why I'm going to be putting it in towards the end, okay? But it'll be a zip file. If you don't know how to install the stuff in terms of the setups, because you're going to get a sprint car setup, a wing sprint car setup, a non-wing sprint car setup, my UMP base, and my super late model base. Okay, and I'll be walking you through those as we do it. Okay, so that being said, let's dive in. Now I'm starting off with the wing sprint car here, and oh man, I probably shouldn't have done that. Dang it, because it's not gonna let me, dude. It's not gonna let me leave. Hey, you guys, those of you who are in this test session with me, just bounce out. Let's just leave because I'm not gonna be able to leave and then come back and bring up a late model. It's not gonna let me do that. So just quit this session and let me bring up we'll start off with the wing sprints. We can all just do wing sprints and then we'll leave that and then we'll come back and do late models and UMPs and all that stuff. Because I forgot, once I join a session with the wing sprint cars, I can't go back in a different car. That's so stupid. iRacing, you need to fix that. So you guys, it'll be SSR Workshop. It'll be SSR Workshop wing sprints. It'll be those of you the elites. It'll be the same password, okay? Which I don't know if you guys can see that or not. Okay. I know, but I've got the stream going here. It's you guys. It's not that I don't want all of you watching to join. I'm trying to keep it controlled. I know everybody would like to be in here with me, but we wouldn't get as much stuff done. We'll go to Charlotte dirt track. We'll be doing all the okay. You're probably listening to me on the stream, and then you're also listening to me in Discord. Yeah, for those of you guys, if you're in the Discord voice channel, mute one because you're gonna hear an echo. Okay, all right. So now that this is loading up real quick, let's go over this because I want you guys to kind of get an idea, because the sprint car stuff, it all started with the sprint car stuff, and I want you guys to kind of get an idea of the background on how I came up with all this stuff, because it's to call it crazy would actually be an understatement. So I got into because I've actually only been doing active iRacing for like 6 months. It started back in like February. SSR started in March, so you guys have probably all heard that story. This was never intended. School of Sim Racing was supposed to be the title of the playlist on YouTube. That was it. Okay, it's obviously become much more than that, but that was it. Now, when I started trying to figure these things out, I was in the same position that a lot of you are probably in. I was out there driving smooth. I'm getting beat by people who are all over the track. I'm pulling my hair out going, what the? Because why is it that these guys are just smoking me when I'm driving nice and smooth and they're literally bouncing off the wall? What are they doing that I'm not? And that was what really got me on the whole like setup journey. I came across OSR, downloaded a bunch of setups, tried a bunch of different things. Nothing really felt good or worked. And then you guys, that session's up. Then I came across a setup by a driver, Weston Newell, who it was the first setup that I'd ever driven that had felt like actually good. And his setup had all 1.25 bars on it, which I was like, that's weird. We don't do that in real life. Like, I would never run 1.25 bars on a slick track. What the hell? So that was what first really got me kind of thinking, like, okay, apparently this is not as simulated as I thought. And so once I figured that out, I started doing a lot more kind of testing and tweaking, and I would have some success, and then I wouldn't, it's kind of back and forth. I had gotten better, but not much. And then there was a forum post by a guy. It's still in there to this day. If you go to the winged sprint car, uh, the section, and to the forum post, it says like sprint car setup tutorial, and he goes through a ton of stuff. And the stuff that he talks about is all breaking down. A lot of it's a lot of real life theory, but he does translate some things to the sim. And one of the things he talked about, which was really really important, was the bars. And he basically broke it down, was like, look, the bars are not used in the sim as they are. They don't react the same way in the sim as they do in real life. They're basically for stability and roll couple, which is a term that you use for the roll and the pitch of the car. And so, yes, stiffer bars, you can get more aero, but, softer, you get more mechanical. And that was basically it, right? About that time, I used to race every single morning with the same group of guys. I was doing a different online business at that time with not much success. And at 5:30 a.m. my time, there would be a 360 wing sprint car race. And I would hop on every morning, and it would be like the same group of guys that we would be racing with. And one of the guys who was always in there and who used to always kick my butt was a guy by the name of Jason Burton. And I heard him, he was actually pretty cool. He wasn't one of these guys who acts like he's protected nuclear codes. He was actually sharing information. And he talked about the wing and how he always kept it forward. And even in the feature, he would just move it back 1 or 2 notches. And when I finally figured all that stuff out, that's when I really started playing with stuff and testing stuff. And that's when I came up with the first batch of setups that you guys initially probably saw the video, how to set up a winged sprint car in iRacing. That was the first video I did. Those were the first setups that I had come up with, and those were the first ones that I went out and won with and like dominated with. Now, keep in mind at that time my I rating was like 1,000. I was in like the third split, but I would go out, set fast time, win the heat, win the feature, led every lap, wasn't even close. And I was like, okay, so this is what I've been missing, right? Like that was what I'd been missing. So I put out all those setups. Well, fast forward a couple months, I'm noticing that there's situation those setups fall off. And that led me down a second journey of non-stop mad scientist mode where I'm testing an insane amount of hours trying to figure stuff out. Figured out a bunch more stuff, got a lot better, and then I really got smashed in the 360 Knoxville Nationals and the Kings Royal. So the two big events that I put on for the league, I got my butt kicked in them. wasn't that happy, but I knew that there was something else that I was missing, and I have figured that out. And that's we're gonna be covering that stuff today. So the stuff that I'm giving you guys, this is applicable stuff that I use. Those of you who saw the video that I put out 2 days ago, my official race at Volusia in the 410, and you guys, those who were in an uproar because I did not show the setup, that is an insider-based setup that was customized to me. A lot of people are like, well, you should put it in there. I can't. The reason why I can't is that setup is built for me. It's built for my driving style. If I give you guys that setup, for example, Bruce, who's in here with me right now, is a great example. Almost every setup that I give him is way too loose for him. Like way too loose. He almost religiously moves the right rear end and drops the right rear bar, like constantly. Devin, on the other hand, like he's got like one of my setups from like one track. He uses it everywhere and has great success. So it depends on your driving style. All right. The stuff that I'm going to be showing you and teaching you guys today is designed so you can build the setups to fit you. That's what I want you to understand. All right. Get the notion out of your head right now that there's a magic unicorn setup that you are going to get, that you are going to run, and that you are going to become a pro with because of the setup. It doesn't exist, you guys. It just doesn't. I've got setups on here from pros. Some of them, I don't know how they get around the track in them. And they're confirmed because a lot of people are like, oh, they're trolling you. I'm like, no, they're not. They are I got them from people who are friends with the pros. Legit, I know this to be fact. I don't know how they drive these things. I think they're some of the worst setups ever invented. But they do, and they're very fast with them. Okay, so that's what you need to understand. Once we get past the 30 to 40% track state, you must understand that all bets are off when it comes to a setup. There is no, hey man, you've got to have the front end up because that's going to give you the most bite. Hey man, you've got to have the left rear end. You've got to have the wing forward. You've got to have the wing flat. None of that stuff matters. You have to have whatever gives you the most comfortable car so you can be smooth and fast. That's what you need to have. Okay, so I know probably a lot of you are going to be disappointed by that because you were probably hoping that I was going to give you something that was just like, hey, all problems are solved. And the base setup that I'm going to give you is going to be better than just about anything else you're going to get, especially out there on the internet. And I'm going to give you the matrix to make it your own, okay? But I want you to understand that you've got to make it your own. There's the 80-20 rule applies in every aspect of life, and it even applies here in sim racing. Now, how does it apply, right? Because I'm not talking about the sim racing community, because that would be like the 90-10 rule where 90% are tools and douchebags and 10 of them are cool. But I'm just joking. But anyways, 80-20 rule is this. 20% of the initial setup stuff that you do is going to give you 80% of your speed. That last 20%, that separates you from the Heilmans and Bergerons of the world. All right? Because if you look at my lap times with what I'm running compared to like when with Tyler Schell and James Tiernan and Eiler and all those guys, that the pros that were in the Knoxville Nationals, we were like a tenth and a half off of them. Now, a tenth and a half is not that big a deal in the grand scheme when you look at from first to last, but when you're talking about a tenth a second per lap, that adds up fast. And that last tenth of a second, that's what's going to take all of the work. That you're going to spend 80% of your effort, your time trying to find that last tenth, and it's all based on getting the setup built for you. Okay? So, well, that's good to hear, Shay. finally has arrived. Does that mean each pro set? Yes, pros have very different setups. They do. Pros have very different setups. Um, Shay, who just was just in the comments. Shay is on team with pros. Shay will even tell you pros run different setups. They all don't. It's not all that they figured out the unicorn setup. They've got it and don't share it. That's not what it is. They're all different. So, it's the same thing, even in real life when we were running uh sprint cars and midgets and stuff like that, we would be doing, we got our list of base setups, right? 10 and a quarter bar, like at Silver Dollar Speedway, half mile high bank, quarter mile track, or quarter mile high banked track. We would run 10 and a quarter bars down the right, thousands down the left, blocked it, straight 5 shocks down the right, 4 sixes down the left. Like, that was a base setup that we ran for almost every short track. Now, that's what we started with. We would always adjust off of that. But when we go to the half miles, it was a much different story. So it's the same type of thing. You're going to get a base setup that you can use for just about everywhere and will work good, and then you're going to fine tune that setup to fit you when that track gets slick and things get hard, because that's where it's going to separate you. Okay, so yeah, and that's the thing. Most of the pros, Sam, you're right. Most of the pros would probably kill it with the iRacing base setup because those guys are incredible. They really are. I mean, their driving skill is insane. So here's the first thing that we're going to do. All right, I'm going to actually show you guys this base setup because I've got it on the car right now. And keep in mind, this is the base that I use to build all of my sprint car setups. All right, I have a couple of other bases that I use. Keep in mind, those are things I just have in my head. I don't have them down on here, and I didn't want to create 8 base setups for you guys when they all revolve around this one that I'm going to show you. Okay, so it's just the tire pressures. Basically the left front is the only one I ever adjust. When the track gets super slick, I might drop the rears down a pound, but even then, that's a rare exception. 13 inches of stagger, I always start with that at just about every track. Charlotte is kind of the cutoff where I'll drop down to like 12 and a half. But even like, Lernerville, I'll run 13, Lanier 13, Leland 13, Fairbury, I'll go to 14, Kokomo 13, right? And then when I get to the bigger tracks, it'll be like 12 and a half. And we're talking fresh track, okay? Front bars, 1050 in the right front, 10 and a quarter in the left front. If you here's something that I've learned, and when we get into the adjustments, I'll talk about this more. When that track gets slick, when the track is fresh, you really want that front end stiff and up. That's like the one thing that I'll tell you. That right there is part of that 80% of your speed. Get the front end, make the front end stiff, get it up. The shocks play a role, but not so much in the speed as opposed to more of a comfort thing. On the rear, 1,000 bars, sometimes I'll run reverse split. That more depends on the track, and then drop it all the way down on a fresh track. Okay, this is going to give you right now, this is basically what I use to qualify at about every track with minor adjustments. All right. And that's it. Wing flat, forward, front wing, I always have at 22 degrees just because I don't like having wing angle on the front. I don't like the way that makes the front of the car feel. I know very, very fast drivers, very competitive drivers, very good drivers who run 28 degrees on the front wing, 30 degrees on the front wing. Okay, once again, it's all about what's comfortable for you. Okay, so this is the base setup that you will be getting. All right, this is what I build all of the insider setups off of. The custom setups that I just built for like Michael Birthday, who's one of the elite drivers on my team, who's in this session with me right now. When I built his custom Eldora setups and his custom Lehman Land setups, I started with this. This is how I start. Okay, so this is the base setup. All right, now what we're gonna do is I've got some guinea pigs in here, and I'm gonna be showing you guys the differences in the way the car will look. We're on a fresh track, but I'm going to use kind of as they're turning laps, I'm going to use kind of as a visual explanation to show different things that happens with the car when you adjust it, why that is, and why it matters. Okay, because I've done a bunch since the 410 race, the second time in as many races where I got passed on the bottom with like 4 laps to go, because my setup was set up for the top and the bottom came in and I couldn't run down there. I've been spending a lot of time trying to figure that out, and have figured out ways to get that. And they're pretty extreme. I'm going to show you guys that stuff, okay, today. So here's the deal, you guys that are in here with me. I'm going to share this setup with you guys. We're going to obviously we're just going to put 10 gallons of fuel in it. I'm going to put a 555 gear in it for now just to keep things kind of uniform. I'm going to share it, and then you guys just go out and turn some laps. And then what I'm going to do is as you guys are turning laps, I'm going to kind of just use a visual explanation of you guys' cars as it's going through to kind of explain what's going on. All right. I know a lot of you guys probably have some questions about the stuff. I'm going to be covering it with you, the physics of it, here in just a second. So, because the main thing that you have to understand with the sim, okay, and I want you guys to, I really want this to take hold because it took me a long time to figure this out. Real life applies in the sim, okay? It does. There's a difference though, and what the difference is the difference is in the translation. All right, so when we think about a language, for example, okay, you think about English and Spanish, right? Table, English, and Spanish, mesa, right? Like that, it's the same thing, but the way that it is understood by the two different parties is different. It's the same thing with the sim. So when we talk about real life racing physics, we're wanting to apply that, but what we have to do is we've got to figure out that translation from real life into the sim, right? So for example, if we were going to set up a car in real life and I wanted to build this car, we were going to set it up like, hey, look, man, bottom's going to come in the last 15 laps of the feature. We want to get this thing winged over on the left side so it can really hug the bottom. In real life, we would do 10 1/4 bars, thousands down the left. I would tie the left side shocks down with a 4.6 and probably a 4.8 or a 4.9 on the left rear, straight 5 on the right rear, and then maybe a 5.4 on the right front. All right. Put a couple of turns into the right rear, take a couple of turns out of the left rear, and, you know, bada bing, bada boom, we're ready to go out and win a race in a sprint car. Like that. That's a real life setup that we've used many, many times. Now in the sim, it's not that simple, because 25,000 split doesn't actually give us what we want. We actually need a whole lot more. So there will be times where I will build a setup now to run the bottom where I will have a 10.25 bar in the right rear and a 9.75 in the left rear. Like the thing is leaned over hard. There are times where I will put super soft bars in the front and super stiff bars in the rear because of the way that I want the car to corner. Keep in mind, all of these different things, these oddball things I'm talking about right now, we're talking about when the track is worn in. So we're talking like 40% and above. All right. It's really about 45%. All right. But to just keep them round numbers, we'll say 40% and above. Once we get to that point, now we're moving from the setup matters and it's more driver. Okay. Because we're on a fresh track right now. These guys are all going to be turning basically similar laps, right? They've got the same setup, and it's really going to come down to who has the best run for that lap on that line, okay? Once that wears off, that goes away, and it really becomes the driver. And so if we look at this, right, we look at Michael's car here, and I zoom in on it. See how the car's leaning over? See how the back's sitting down? That's what we want when we're setting up our car on a fresh track. This is opposite, all right, in terms of the way that we would look at this in real life. This is the way I want you guys to understand. So in real life, we would be raising that front end up as the night went on and, you know, raising up that rear end some. What I've discovered is as this track slicks off, I want to be actually leaving the rear end fairly low and dropping the front end. Because when I have it raised up all the way and that track gets slick, what tends to happen with the car is it can get real dart. It can dart. So when you've got the front end up like that, when you turn, as soon as that car turns, you're gonna get that darting motion. All right. If you soften that front end some, okay, and I'm gonna cover all this stuff, you guys, on how to do this. All right. I'm just trying to cover the whys behind it, because I don't want to just say, hey, do this, because that's not going to help you. All right. So when we soften the front end, what that allows to do is it allows the car it allows it to smooth out some. Now, Shay, who was in here, for example, right? Shay put the front end up, right? That's what he runs. Dude's kicked my butt plenty of times. All right. And for him, it works. Okay. For him, it works. For me, not so much. So I drop it down some. And I can run laps just as fast as him, right, with it that way. So you want to get this, like, you're going to hear me hammer this home a lot. Get the concept out of your mind that you got to be doing what everybody else is doing. You don't. Okay, you don't. Qualifying, man, jack the front end up, get the rear down, and you know, wing forward and go. Once you get to the heat races, I mean, it's really what's comfortable for you. All right, and that's what you want to be really, really focusing on. Heat race and then feature. All right, so let's bring this up here real quick, the garage, and I'm gonna actually change the view just because that's gonna make me kind of nauseous while I'm doing that. Let's bring this up real quick, and I'm going to walk you through this stuff. So you guys, first off, stagger's pretty self-explanatory, right? The right rear is bigger than the left rear. All that does is give you that natural turn. One thing that a lot of people don't realize is, and iRacing will give you, you know, they'll give you insight onto how their physics react, and what they say here is true, okay, you guys? So keep this in mind. More oversteer on the throttle. That is true, all right? More understeer off the throttle. So if you're running a lot of stagger, that car is going to be really wanting to rotate when you're on the gas. But when you get off the gas, it's the opposite. So that's always something to keep in mind. Fairbury qualifying 14 inches of stagger, great, because I can run that thing wide open on the wall. I don't run 14 inches of stagger in a race setting because if I got to get out of the gas, that thing is going to push hard with 14 inches of stagger, right? Now, there might be some of you who are like, well, dude, I run all the time. It doesn't bother me. Yes, but remember, we're talking about one piece of the puzzle. So everything else that you do with that stagger is what matters. That it has, everything is interconnected. Everything has an effect. So, you know, to use Shay, for example, again, right? And the reason I use, because I've talked to Shay a lot and I know his setups and I've seen him and stuff like that. But what he does in terms of, you know, if he needs to loosen up his car is different than someone like Justin does. Justin Soltz, he's another one that I talked to a lot who's very, very fast, right? If you took their setups and compared them, it would be at the opposite ends of the spectrum. Completely different. So it's all a matter of what you find is more comfortable. A stagger adjustment, right? When I put out the insider setups, Waylon, for example, like almost religiously drops the stagger. Where, like I said, with Bruce, he almost religiously drops the bar, right? So it's gonna provide you a different effect. It's not like, oh, if you're loose, just take out stagger. No, for some people it could be a stagger issue. For some people it could be a right rear spacing issue or a left rear spacing issue. It's all about how you drive. All right. So that's what stagger does. Front stagger, I always had this at 1. The reason I do is because it provides me more crossweight. That's the only reason I do it, and everything else is built around it. I do use trail braking sometimes, not so much in the 360s, more or less the 410s, but I just run it. I mean, that's just what I do. That's one of those things I just run, okay? Now, over here, we're going to skip a lot of stuff. We're not going to skip it. We're just going to go away from this. We're going to talk about something here really quick. The packer and the bump rubber weight. This was something that I've said for a very long time. I consider this a setting and not an adjustment. All right. There's a reason for that because a lot of people are like, well, no, that changes the car. Yes, it does, and it changes it in a dramatic way. All right. And to illustrate this, I'm going to show you this. Hey, you guys on the track, come back into the garage. I'm going to give you guys each a setup real quick that I want you guys. Or it's just going to be a little tweak to the setup. All right. So this first one, I'm going to take this shim out. We're going to save that as base, and I'm going to put this as MB. You guys, I'm going to share a setup with you guys. It's going to have your initials on there, okay? So make sure you grab that one. All right, so I guess I could just share it directly to them. Hey, Bruce, I just shared a setup with you. Put that one on for me. And then just go out and run some laps. So you guys, what this thing does is this is going to control the amount that the car wings over. Devin, I just shared one with you too. And Michael, I just shared one with you too. Now I'm going to show you basically what it looks like from the cockpit because I'm going to go out right now and show you myself, and then we're going to look at it from the outside of them. All right. So I've got a 0 packer in my car right now. I want you to look at how far, and let me do this real quick. I'm going to move my FOV back so you can get a real good look at how much this thing wings over as we go into the corner. See how much it's winging over down the straightaway? See how much that thing pulls to the left? Okay, that setup should not do that, all right? That is from that packer. Yeah, sorry for those of you who just changed that packer on and you're out there spinning out now. That's what that packer does, okay? The bump rubber just determines how fast it does it. When you adjust that packer, understand that you have changed every aspect of your setup. I can give you a perfectly good setup like they just had, and I take that packer out, you have got piece of garbage, junk, because the car is going to wing over so much that not only is it going to put the weight on the left side, you got to understand, if we put weight on the left side, it's got to come from somewhere. It doesn't create it, right? Even though it's downforce, that air, you've got the weight of the car. It's not just magically created like, oh, we got 100 more pounds in left rear. No, it's got to come from somewhere, and it's pulling it off the right side. That's why that car is not only going to just wing over, but it's going to want to snap and spin out on you. So that packer, that is a fine-tune adjustment, and even then, I do not recommend adjusting it. At small tracks, I'll run 1.5 inches. At big tracks, I run 2. Like, that's it. There are very rare situations with other setups that I've done where I will go to like 1 inch. And understand that the whole setup is built on that packer. All right? That's why I'm covering this with you guys right now, because I want you to understand this. I can give you a perfect setup. You adjust that packer, you're going to junk it. Okay, it has that big an effect on it, especially when you're talking about the aerodynamics and the dynamic weight of the car. Huge effect on it. So don't mess with it. Just set that thing and forget it. All right. If you're on a short track, like I said, and you want it to wing over some, go from a 2 to a 1.5. If you're on a bigger track and you want it to be flatter, go from a 1.5 to a 2. Other than that, just leave it alone. Don't mess with it, because you're really playing with fire. All right. Now, you guys can come back in if you want, because I know that setup feels like junk. I'm gonna see. Michael had the 0-1, so I'll show you guys this just from a chase standpoint. And whoops, let's bring that up. And he's running the top. See how much that car's sliding out on him? He's on the top. See how low that left rail is into the dirt. All right. We didn't change I didn't change the ride height. I didn't change nothing. I just changed that packer. And I know there's some people like, oh, that's how you set the ride height. No, it's not. That is not how you set your ride height. You not set your ride height with your freaking packer. Okay? Yes, it affects the ride height, but you don't set the ride height with the packer. You set the ride height with the ride height. Okay? So that I want to cover. I'm covering this because, like I said, it can really mess up a good setup. You can be like, oh man, I'll see if they can get this thing to wing over some more and get it down to the bottom. Don't do that. Right? Like I said, 1/2 inch at most, 2 inch or 1.5. Don't mess with anything lower. All right, unless you're just wanting to test all different kinds of stuff and maybe build a setup around it. But anything that I'm going to share with you and tell you about, keep in mind it is not intended to go below that. Like I said, I do have some setups from before, but they're really extremes. And now I don't really mess with it. Like 1.5 or 2 inches. That's it. Okay. Don't do anything else, because you're really gonna mess stuff up. Do you lower the packer when track goes sick? No, I do not lower the. Like I said, Sam, maybe I'll go 1/2 inch, like maybe from a 2 to 1.5 inches, like if I'm gonna be running the bottom or something. But that's it. Does it affect the front if you run stagger at 0? No, it doesn't really. Because the you're not gonna feel it. It's just a slight bit of weight. So here, I'll show you, and then we'll get back into everything else. So if we look at, we've got 1 inch of stagger right now in the front, right? Our crossweight is 47.7, which you don't need to pay attention to. 278, 463. We drop it down. 275, 460. So it's really a crossweight thing. That's why I use it. Okay, so that's it. Now, when we come to the adjustment aspects of the car, all right, we talked about the packer, bump rubber, it's the same thing. Now we've got everything else. So nose wing, I always run that. That to me, once again, that's a setting. That's not an adjustment for me. So I run it at 22. I always will. I will not change it. Every time I've tried changing it, I absolutely hate it. I cannot stand the way that makes my car feel. It adds front downforce. Basically, there's situations where it makes the front end hook up more, right? I prefer to do that mechanically than aerodynamically. So I always just leave it at 22. The I mean, you guys who are on the track, I mean, you can keep running if you want, or you can take a break. I'm just kind of going over the the garage stuff now. Um, so that's me. Top wing angle. You're gonna get a sheet. It's gonna look like this. If I can bring it up real quick. Along with this open wheel dirt matrix right here, okay, which will explain to you how to adjust the car, what adjustments to make. You're going to get this for the wing sprint cars. This is kind of my guide that I use for determining my wing angle, okay? Percentage of the track, basically fresh track up to 40 to 60%. I have it at 24 degrees. I run it forward. All right. A lot of the setups that you'll see with my feature setups in the Insider program, the wing angle will be somewhere between 24 and 27 degrees because the track is usually going to be somewhere between 50 and 60% at the start. All right. And then we'll move it back accordingly. As you can see, I've got this here. So you'll have this that will come with the file that you'll download. All right. This is what I use to determine my wing angles. Okay. One thing about the wing angle that you need to understand, because you'll hear people I'll be like, oh, I've got the wing at 30 degrees, and they're like, oh, I've got it at 24 and I just pulled it back. It's the same. No, it's not. So I've actually done a lot of testing on this with a software, RST. It's kind of like Motec. It's a different one, and it sucks. Don't get it. It always crashes. It's garbage. But I've actually done data testing on this, where I had to input all the car parameters, go out and run laps and get all this data, and it tells you. So the farther you move the wing back, yes, it does increase the angle some, but what it does is it also plants the rear end. So if you have your wing at 24 degrees and then you've moved it back to 10, it is not the same as having it at 30 degrees and forward. Because what the difference is that when you've got it yanked back, when you've trunked the wing, as we say, you're putting all of that downforce on the rear. That's why the car feels like it's pushing that front end, why it doesn't want to turn, because you've got the rear end so hooked up. When you add angle and you keep it forward, you're keeping the downforce centered over the car. All right. So you're getting you're hooking up the entire car as opposed to just getting the rear wheels hooked up. And as much as people will be like, oh, well, you need rear drive. Yes, you do. But you also got to be able to turn the damn thing. When the car's snow plowing because you've got so much wing angle in front in it, that's not, or wing, you got the wing so far back, excuse me. You don't want that. You want to there's a balance there. And so the general rule that I kind of go by, which is why I put that sheet together, is if I'm ending a race and I'm further back than 5, keep it not. I mean, if it's like a black ice track, there's going to be times where it'll be 30 degrees and all the way back. But in most situations, if I'm running a race and I'm ending it and I've got the wing angle or I've got the wing position further than 5, that means that I need to increase that angle. Because I don't like to have it back further than 5 unless, like I said, it's like it's like black ice, because I want the downforce more centered. Okay? Because that's what makes these cars work. Everything is revolved around that wing, getting that car left side down and hooking that thing up. And so when you can keep that thing more centered over the car, you're going to notice a big difference in the way that it handles on a slick track as opposed to just keeping it at 24 and trunking it. All right? So that sheet will be with it. Now, torsion bars. A lot of people talk about torsion bars. A lot of people, I know you guys, I had dozens of people asking me, saying, please cover torsion bars and please cover shocks. All right, we're going to get into that now. So the torsion bar is nothing but a fancy spring. That's all it is, okay? And the way that a torsion bar works is it twists, and it's the untwisting that applies the spring-like effect. All right. I always say springs create the action, shocks or dampers control it. All right. It's the same thing. Torsion bars create the action, shocks control it. Okay. So what do I mean by that? Well, if you have a stiffer right side, right? You have stiffer right side bars. All right. It's stiff because of the bars. The shocks are going to help control that roll and pitch. All right. Along with it. So yes, the shocks help transfer the weight. All right. Yes, that does matter, but it's just it goes it's a team. You want to think of it as a tandem. All right, they work together. Okay, because you can run really stiff bars in the front, and then you can run shocks. You could run like if I put like a 4-5 on the left front, and then like a 4-5 on the right front. Right, that front end that was super bouncy and stiff when I had those 6.3s up there, those easy up shocks. Now, not so much. Now it's a lot more controlled. Okay, so it's still stiff because we've got those stiffer bars, but the shocks are helping to negate some of that stiffness, so it's not bouncing like crazy when you're going down the straightaway at USA and the car's jerking you all over the place, right? Throwing you out your cockpit. So that's how they work together. Now, when I first started building setups, it was like, look, as the track slicks off, put in a stiffer bar. Okay. And then I was like, I don't think we want to be doing that no more. My setups seem to be falling off. As the track slicks off, put in a softer bar. Okay. Now I'm going to tell you, put in whatever freaking bar you want. All right. That, I'm going to repeat that. Run whatever bar you want. Whatever is comfortable for you. Because what needs to be adjusted, what I was doing is I was setting my ride heights. I was using basically kind of real world ride heights, and then I was using the bars to go along with that. Right? So I would be running 10.25 bars in the rear for the feature, and I would have my ride heights, I think it was like 14 and a half and 13 or something like that, which is basically like what we would run on a 410 sprint car. Okay, it would be something like that. And as the track slicked off and I burned off fuel, that car would raise up and the setup would fall off. All right, so then I went to softer bars, and I was maintaining the ride heights. I'd actually lowered the ride heights down some. I went down to like 12 and a half on the left rear and 14 on the right rear. And I'd found that, well, it was actually working better. Well, it's actually it wasn't the bars per se, it was the ride heights. That was the thing. Okay, the ride heights is really what matters. I talked about Justin earlier. Justin showed me a setup that he ran that I couldn't believe the dude could get it around the track. But he had like crazy stiff bars on the right, like super soft bars on the left, and I was like, dude, is this like qualifying? He's like, no, man, I ran this on slick track. I was like, okay, so I mean, it's really about what is comfortable to you. Charlotte, this track is a great example. When it gets slick, the top gets rough, really rough. You're running a 975, you are going to feel every single bump. Same thing at Eldora, every single bump, okay? But you can throw a 10.25 bar in that right rear, and what you need to do is you need to compensate for it with your corner weights. And this is really what matters, all right, is the corner weights. So there's 3 ways to have a car, all right? Right rear dominant, left rear dominant, or balanced. And all of that is in the rear corner weights. Pay no attention to cross weight. Cross weight doesn't matter, okay? This percentage means nothing. The only thing that it matters is to pass tech. That's it. In terms of the handling of your car, I could care less about cross weight. What I focus on are these rear corner weights, okay? Because even though, yes, the dynamic weight of the car is going to shift to that left side because of the wing, I know that if I've got these in these ranges, that it'll work. That dynamic weight will complement it and it'll work, okay? So, what is that weight? Well, a balanced car is pretty much what we've got right now. As long as we're within about 7 pounds of each other, I consider that to be a balanced setup. All right. A right rear dominant car is going to be basically 7 and above on the right side. A left rear dominant car is going to be 7 and above on the left side. Okay. So for example, if I drop this down like this, right? Now we have 477 on the right, 445 on the left. That's a right rear dominant car. What that car is going to do is it's going to be driving on the right rear. This is a great setup if you plan on running the top. You're like, look, I'm starting on the pole. The groove's going to be high. I'm going to get up there, rip the lip, and leave everybody in the dust. This is a great setup for that. understand, if the track moves to the bottom like it did to me at Volusia, you're kind of screwed. Okay, so everything's a trade-off. All right, it's not right or wrong. It's a trade-off. Trying to get your car to work through the longest period of time. All right, you've got to kind of ask yourself, what do I think is going to happen and what do I want to do? Okay. And I'm gonna walk you through after we kind of cover the explanation. I'm gonna walk you through the process that I go through for doing this here. It will be just a minute, all right? And understand it's the same process for every car, okay? So that's what you want to be kind of thinking about, all right? If I was gonna be running the top, I'd have a more right rear dominant car. If I was gonna be running the bottom, I'd have a more left rear dominant car. If I wanted to run both, I would have a more balanced car. Okay, a lot of you guys I hear all the time. You'll ask questions. Hey, Tommy, or hey, somebody, can someone help me out? I'm going down the straightaway, and all of a sudden the car wants to snap to the wall. Okay, what that is you've got a left rear dominant car. You're catching the slick, and you're getting on the throttle, and when that thing is hooking up, it's shooting you to the wall because that's what left rear bite does. Okay, remember, right rear gets you in, left rear gets you out. So that's what's happening. You're catching slick, and those tires are spinning, and when they hook, that weight is bam, and you're just going right to the wall. And it doesn't matter if it's that corner exit or if it's on a straightaway. That left rear dominant weight that's what's driving you to the wall. Okay, so that's what you want to be thinking. Those are the things that you want to be thinking about. Now, when we look at our corner weights with our shocks are really a comfort thing. All right, this is something I want you guys to understand. Front shocks are more about feel and comfort. Yes, if you hover over this, and iRacing gives our little explanation, right? More front bump, tighter under braking, more rear bump, tighter under acceleration. Yes, there is a lot of truth to that. All right. Problem is we don't, on oval tracks, we don't adjust our shocks in tandem, right? I'm like, well, I need it to be tighter under braking, so I'm going to increase the bump stiffness, right? We don't do that. We have things offset. Things are different. And so we're looking for cornering capability, the most that we can get. So when it comes to your shocks, the bump is the compression of that shock. That's the compression, the push down effect, right? When you hit a bump, that's why it's called that. The rebound is the extension of that shock, okay? Bump, the higher the number, the more of that weight is being applied to the contact patch or the tire. You need to think of your tire as nothing more than a spring. That's all that it is, all right? So if you have a 6 bump on the right rear, for example, understand that when you go into that corner, yes, that weight, the weight's not all shifting and transferring to that corner. It's not going to be rolling over like you see it, because what's happening is that weight is being pushed down on that shock and it is being applied. It's being pushed straight down onto that tire, and that will rotate the car. All right, that's what the bump does. Okay, now if I soften the bump, what will happen is more weight's going to transfer to that corner and less is going to be applied to the contact patch. All right, does that make sense, you guys? All right. I hope that makes sense. If that doesn't make sense, let me know, okay? But that's how the bump works. The rebound is the same, it's just in reverse. You'll hear a lot of people saying, I've actually tested this, and I know this to be true. People will be like, oh, rebound, tie it down and hold the weight there. That's not exactly correct, all right? So if we think about it in reverse terms, okay, and you look at the left rear, for example, we have a 3.9. That is the car coming down, right? We're not applying any mechanical weight there, right? We're not applying any more weight there because we've got it at the lightest it'll go, which is a 3. And then when that thing shifts down, we're basically just holding it there. So we want the car to wing over and hold it there, right? that weight there. But that weight's being held there. It's not all being applied to the contact patch. Now, when that car, this is why you'll hear me saying, other people will say this too. When you unload the suspension, these cars get all out of whack. This is why. When you've got that thing, when you've got that rebound at like a 9 or an 8, you've got that thing tied down. When you let off the weight shift, what it's doing is, since the rebound is so tight, it's so hard to get that shock to expand, that it's actually lifting up the corner of the car before it is expanding. Does that make sense? So you're actually pulling the left rear tire off the ground. All right. Now keep in mind, you're talking about it's slight, but in terms of the weight transfer, right? Because the left rear is still on the ground, but in terms of the weight transfer, it's pulling a lot more of that weight off of the left rear tire. That's why when you unload the suspension on these things, they're a freaking nightmare. Okay? So you want to make sure that with this rebound here, the rule that I use is that the fresher the track, the more I tie it down. As the track slicks off, the more I'll lighten it up. I'll never go beyond a 6 on the rebound for the left rear in these cars, because then it's just rolling over too much. Now, there are situations where, for example, like a World of Thunder league race or something, where the track is basically 100% by heat race 2, right? Like a situation like that, where in the feature I would be running like a 3-3 on the. I mean, I'm just rolling this thing, I'm rolling the thing over on the right hand side to just get any kind of side bite that I can. But those situations are very, very few and far between. For the most part, I'll never go beyond a 6 on the left rear. Okay, so that's the way rebound works. It's the same concept for the front here. All right, it's the same concepts. So you want to think about everything, like I said, in moderation, right? When you start going to the extremes with stuff, that's when you're going to run into problems. Okay, so with the shocks, a good range for the front shocks here, for the right front shock, is I always like to have my right front bump higher than my left front bump. There will be a situation where they'll be equal, all right? So equal or higher. I almost always have the right front at least a 5. I'll have the rebound at either 4 or 3. There are situations where I will run a 5.5 on the right front. It's usually very, very fresh tracks, but for the most part, it's a 5.4. The left front, you're really just tying that down a little bit more, because you're wanting the whole thing once you get that left side rail down, that's what you're trying to do. Is you're trying to keep it there. All right, same concept. On the rear here, straight 5 shock on the right rear. You could basically set this at 5/5, never touch it, and you're going to be good on 95% of the track surfaces you deal with. Okay, you really will. And then 3.9 here on the left. I'll go 3.9, 4.9, 4.8, and 4.7. There are very rare situations where I would go to like a 5 on the bump. We're talking, extreme Williams Grove track type of situation, like that. That's pretty much it. Wheel spacing, you guys, wheel spacing is the farther out, the looser the car is on entry. It'll also loosen you up through the whole turn. All right. If you imagine a pivot point, the further that thing goes out, the easier it is to push it around. It's just leverage, right? And if you look at this, if this is our center and we've got our right rear and our left rear, if we're going to pivot this thing, the further I move that out, the simpler it's going to be. Vice versa, if I keep the right rear in and move the left rear out, it's going to be harder, right? So I kind of move these in tandem. Shorter tracks, I'll go to 1775, maybe 18, and I'll have that left rear out into like 1350. And then as the night goes on, I'll move the right rear in a quarter, move the left rear out a quarter, move the right rear in a quarter, move the left rear out a quarter. And, by the end of the night, if we're on a slick track, I'll be, at 1750, maybe 17 and a quarter, and I'll have the left rear at 14 or 14 and a quarter. Something you need to keep in mind. There's a big difference between tight and hooked up. You can be hooked up, all right, and not be tight. A lot of people tighten the crap out of their car, and then they go into the corner and you have to break it loose to turn it. and that's all bad. And then so what do? Well, you tighten the car up more because you think the car's loose. Well, actually, it's not. You've got the car too tight. That's something that can happen a lot of times if you move the wing too far back. That's why I say just add more angle, because if you've got the wing in the trunk and that car is so tight, you have to break it loose. What happens is once you break these things loose, you're not getting it hooked back up until you get to fresh dirt and you get out the throttle and roll back in. Okay? So you want the car to still turn. These things should be turning basically on their own. All right? So you want them to still turn, and then you're going to be controlling it with the throttle. All right? So let's talk about how we're going to set these things up. And just to illustrate something, Bruce, Mike, Devin, I'm going to build 3 setups. I'm going to keep everything the same except for one. I'm going to change just one thing on them just to illustrate a point. Okay, they're going to be similar to qualifying setups. All right, so I'm going to show you guys something right now. This is the difference with the fresh track. Keep in mind when the track slicks off, not so much, but when it's fresh, this is when you want to do this stuff. So okay. Oops. All right, Mike, I just shared a setup with you. It's going to be MB-1, so try that out. Now here, I'm going to put these torsion bar stops here at 0. All right, just put that on. Go out and turn a few laps fast as you can. Okay. All right, Devin, I just did the same thing with you. Go put it on, turn a few laps as fast as you can. Don't worry, Bruce, I didn't forget about you. I got yours coming right now. Okay, so when I talk about, when I say there's no unicorn setup or anything like that, there's the one thing, and I've kind of reiterated it before, but there's one thing when the track is fresh. All right, if you want these things to be at their fastest when the track is fresh, you need to have the front torsion bars all the way up. You have to have the left front all the way up at minimum. You can play with the right front a little bit for your cross weight, but you want to try to get it as high as you can. You want the rears to be all the way down. Okay? Doesn't really matter the bars you're running. It doesn't. From all the testing I've done, what I've found is that it's more about those torsion bars, the ride height of the car being up in the front and down in the rear when the track is fresher. It's going to have a huge effect on your time. All right? Once it slicks off, like I said before, once you get to like 40, 50%, then all bets are off. You do with it whatever you have to make yourself comfortable. Okay? If we look at Mike's last few laps here, 13.6, 13.5, 13.5. Devin, 13.9, 13.6, 13.8. His was in the middle. And oh, Bruce didn't go out yet. So here, I'll run Bruce's right now. Oh God, I gotta put that back. So I've got this front end all the way down. First of all, see how the car wants to snap around? The lower you put that front end, the more it's going to want to do that. So your ride heights, the more, the lower it is, the more. Think about it in terms of your side bite. The lower it is, the more side bites you're going to have, the more grip you're going to have in the corner. the higher, the more grip you're going to have in the straightaway. All right. So I'm running 13.6s right now with this around here. And the track's actually slicked off some. All right. Doing the same exact setup with the front end up, I can tell you right now it's going to be 0.2 of a second faster for me. All right. Oh, Bruce, it's okay, man. I just did it myself. I didn't know. I thought you went to the bathroom or something. I didn't know. I didn't hear you. So, I'm gonna walk these guys through how I build the setup real quick, and then we're gonna actually hop out and go head over to the late models next. So having the front up, like I said, on a fresh track, especially the left front, makes a difference when it's fresh. Once the track slicks off, all bets are off. Okay, then you adjust it whatever feels good for you. Now, how do we build a setup, right? Because that's what everybody wants to know, right? Because everybody wants that setup that I ran with, Volusia, right? Why didn't you give that to us? Well, because that setup was built for me. Okay, that setup was built for my driving style. Like I said before, if I gave that setup to someone else, if I gave that setup to Bruce, he'd be like, dude, I don't really like this. Okay, same thing with Devin or whoever, right? Because it's built for my driving style. Remember, that's where you're gonna find that last tenth of a second, is fine tuning that thing for you. And this is how I do it. Now, not to push product or anything like that, but the mouse pad that I have that you can buy on my website that's got the adjustments on there, those are my go-to adjustment. And hold on, let me see if I have the picture of that so I can just show you guys the picture. Oh, there it is. Okay, so I put this on a mouse pad, like something cool to sell. But these are my go-to adjustments. All right, when the car is acting a certain way. Not so much for building the setups, but like just adjustments overall. All right, so decreasing the right rear spacing, softening the right rear bar, decreasing stagger. If I'm loose throughout the turn, like those are my go-to things to change, right? Increasing the stagger, increasing the spacing on the right rear, or decreasing left rear spacing, go-to things to change for the car being tight throughout the corner. All right. Now, the way that I use this is we've got the corner of the car and then the issue. I do this for the wing sprint cars, the dirt midgets, and the non-wing sprint cars. This is the order that I go through. Remember, right rear gets you in, left rear gets you out. If you wanted to think about the way the weight in the car moves, imagine you have a sprint car, and right in the center of the car, there's a string that's got a pendulum hanging on it, right? And so when you go into the corner, right, and let's say that was representing the weight, not the G-forces, but the weight. As you're going into the corner, that thing's going to be from the right rear, right? Excuse me, you got the right front where you're turning in, it's shifting to the right rear, right? And then as we're going through the corner, that thing's shifting around, and then we're driving out, right? Like that's the way that the weight's going to work. So you're driving in on the right sides through the center of the corner, that weight's shifting, and then now you're driving out off the left. So if my problem is the entry, I start with the right rear. Every time. All right. So if I am loose on entry, major adjustments, bars are major adjustments. Torsion stops are more of a fine-tune adjustment. They can be major adjustments if you go from like 0 to 3 turns. Like that can be a major adjustment. You don't ever want to do that. Those things can really be finicky. When I adjust on those, I never make more than half a turn adjustment unless it's something that I know from experience, like, oh no, I'm going to go a turn on this. All right, but when I'm building initial setups, I go half turns. Okay, so that's another adjustment. The excuse me, the shock, right? The bump, that's more of a fine tune adjustment. Same thing with the right rear rebound. Um, Wheel spacing, that's more of a major adjustment. Right? You move that wheel out a half an inch or move it in a half an inch, that can have a huge effect on the way the car feels. All right. So I will start with the right rear. Okay. Then if I do one or two right rear adjustments and nothing seems to be working, then what I do is I go to the left front. Now, why would I go to the left front? Well, the reason I go to the left front is because weight transfers crossways. So, for example, if I've got my left front um, here on the chassis side of things, if I've got this thing all the way down, right, we've got 442 pounds on the right rear, I take this thing up to even, I got 460. Okay, same thing with my shocks. If I go dropping the rebound here, right, increasing the bump, yeah, that's going to affect it, with the turn and stuff like that, but the amount of weight transfer, dynamic weight transfer that we're getting now is increased. So that's why I will go to the left front next. I'll try one or two things on the left front. If that doesn't work, then I go to the left rear, try a couple of things, and then I go to the right front. What I will say is this, with this base setup, you shouldn't need to make more than a handful of adjustments. Okay, you shouldn't, because the setup is pretty doggone close for most tracks. Smaller tracks, move the right rear out some. Bigger tracks, move it in some. Same thing on the left rear. Smaller tracks, move the left rear in. Bigger tracks, move the left rear out. Right? You know, the front end, right? Rough tracks, soften up the bump, maybe, tie it down, put some straight shocks on there, straight 5 in the right, maybe a straight 4 on the left front, you're good. Smoother tracks, really fast tracks, Knoxville or something like that, right? When it's not incredibly junked, or when Craig hasn't done one of his sessions where he's roughing up the track on purpose. You might be able to just run like a 6.3 on the right front, maybe a 5.3 or a 5.4 on the left front, right? So it's all a matter of feel. But that is the path. That is how you're going to go through and build your setups. Okay? It's just like that. All right. And when it comes to the last tidbit that I'll give you here on the wing sprint cars, don't be afraid to go outside the boundaries in terms of reality, right? Like I said earlier, if I'm trying to build a setup that leans over a lot to get that thing on, down to the bottom, I'll go 10 and a quarters on the right and I'll go 975s on the left. I'll even drop my left front bar down. I heard that. I have not confirmed this, but the source that I got it from, I would think is extremely reliable. All right. Alex Bergeron, who's won the last 2 championships, the guy who builds his setups, from what I understand, from what I've heard, and like I said, it's a pretty reliable source. They run 950 bars in the front, always. Now, we've all seen Bergeron run, but I've seen the guy who builds the setups run too. Dude is fast in a wide variety of track states. So don't be afraid to think outside the box for you guys. All right. You soften up the left side, you stiffen up the right side. It's just physics. The car's going to tilt. And then you use these torsion bar stops. What the heck? Oh, we're already done. It's already an hour. You use the torsion bar stops to control that weight. Put that weight where you want it. Don't be afraid of ride heights. Okay. You guys, I'm going to get the other session up here in just a second. Okay. So we're going to be doing late models next. All right. So it's really just a matter of getting that thing comfortable for you, and use that matrix to walk you through it. All right. If you want to know and I'll tell it to you. I can tell it to you now. I mean, I could show it to you, but I don't. I'd have to do another session. I got to build one. But that the Volusia setup, a lot of you guys have the Volusia setup. It's the insider setup. All I did was is just reversed the split in the rear bars, and I did 50 thousandths instead of 25 thousandths. I think I had a 10 and a quarter in the left rear with a 975 in the right rear. It really flattened the car off, but it made it have incredible drive around the top. The problem was is trying to run it on the bottom, the car wouldn't lean to the left because I had flattened it out so much. So that's that thing I talk about where it's a trade-off. My car was super fast on the top. Had that last caution not come out, I'd have won. I'd have won by a straightaway and a half. But caution came out. Dude had the bottom working, and tip my cap to him. Dude just beat me, right? Flat out, his car was working. He was driving the wheels off of it, and he had it on the bottom, stuck to the track. When I tried to go to the bottom, I was like, yeah, this ain't going to work. Because I had sold out for the top. Like, that's what I did. So just always remember everything is a balancing act. It's a trade-off. And don't be afraid to try, things that are just out the box. The one thing you always want to make sure of when the track's fresh, get that front end up, get that wing flat and forward. Do that, you're going to find more speed than you've ever thought possible. Once you get from like the heat races on, now it's all a matter of getting that thing comfortable for you. All right. So before we get into the late models, has anybody got any questions? Let me see. Is that for? Sorry, just trying. Oh, that Scott, I'm gonna put it into the comments here in just a few minutes. I'm gonna have it. It'll be a zip folder for all the documents, all the stuff that we've got. Okay. Um, where do you get that form? It'll be. I haven't put it in here yet, but it'll be put into the chat here. It'll be a link that you can download it. Okay. Now, you guys, we're going to do the super late models. Understand, I use the same setups for super late models as I do for pro late models. The only difference is a gear change. Maybe a slight stagger change every once in a while just because of the difference in power. But other than that, it's the same setups. All right, it really is. Or at least the starting point is the same. Let me clarify that. The starting point is the same. Building them is a little bit different, or the end result might be different, but the starting point is the same. All right, you guys, that's going to be going up right now. Now, one of the things that I really like about the late models, and it's one of the reasons I want to race them more, same thing with the non-wings, is from everything that I have tested and tried and all of that stuff, there is no situation like we have with the wing sprint cars. Meaning, like, I don't care what you do with your setup, from everything that I've tested, if you don't have that front end up in qualifying, you're going to be slower than everybody else. You just are. Right? There are very rare situations where you might hit the nail on the head with everything else and it all falls into place. There was a setup I had at Volusia a while back in the 360s where I had the front end basically down. I only had like one turn in the left front, but everything else that I had around it was pretty different than what I normally did, and it was a very fast setup. That was the exception, not the rule. So, and I've tested, because I don't look, you guys, I didn't want to believe it because I was mad when I first discovered. I was like, this is bull, man. Like, really? Come on, iRacing. This is what we do. We just jack up the front end and drop the rear for qualifying. Yay! All right. I'm like, that sucks. Like, what's the point in that, right? Because I'm a nerd for this stuff. If you can't tell, I'm a setup geek. I love figuring this stuff out. So, and you guys, same password. So I was like, dude, that blows. It's got to be different. It's not. It's just not. Like the track's fresh. Get the front end up. All right, and get the rear end down. That's where you're going to find your speed. And then everything else with the sprint cars is, when the track slicks off, that's when you start building it for you. With the late models, I haven't found that. I have tested a ton of stuff. There is no setting, that's going to get you all that speed that I can find. Everything is a matter of comfort. There is one thing, and iRacing, they did this in the last build, the season 3 build, where they talked about slick tracks, front down, rear up. They changed the aero package on it, and you want to make sure that as the track starts to slick off, that you've got that the nose down and the rear up. That's going to give you the most traction. So you want to max out your rear deck lid height and drop your nose as low as you can get it. Now, when the track is fresh, there's actually not that much of a difference from everything that I can tell. But as the track slicks off, it's a pretty noticeable difference in terms of your rear grip. Okay. Now the base setup for this, and I hope I can find it. There it is. I knew I saved it up front. Is right here, SSR SLM base. Like I said, this says SLM for super late model, just so you know that this has got the super late model gear in it. You'll just need to change the gear for the for the uh, the pros and for the track that you're at. This should actually be like a 481 for here. All right, you guys, I'm going to share this base with you. Go out and turn some laps, and then what we'll do is you guys can actually tell me how the car is feeling, and then I'll show some adjustments. As I'll do some adjustments for you guys, so everyone can see real world, how these things are affected. Because you guys, the late models are far more complex than the sprint cars. They just are. The non-wing sprint cars, you guys, I'm going to be honest, I'm not going to cover those a whole lot because the base setup that you're going to get is really, really good, and you're going to create the setup the same exact way as the winged one. And it's the same rules apply. The only difference is you don't have a wing. That's the only difference. But everything else applies. The main difference with the non-wing sprint cars is they're the opposite of the winged when the track is fresh. When the track is fresh, you want the whole entire car low. And as it slicks off, you want to raise it up, especially the front end. It's the opposite. That's all it is. So, the same concepts, it's the same physics for those sprint cars apply. These, there's a whole lot more to them. They're way more complex. Now, what I will tell you is there's something I will tell you. A lot of this stuff you don't have to mess with. So, for example, axle J-bar height. I run mine at 10. I never touch it. I'll show you why. Devin actually showed me this. Jacked it. First of all, pay attention to the weights here. 757, 544, right? We've got 212 here on the rear. Nothing changed. Our deck height didn't change. Our left rear bite didn't change. Our corner weights didn't. Nothing changed. Nothing. Right? Now, does that mean there is no change in it if we, on the track? I have no idea. What I will tell you is this. The lower, right, the more, power down, the more you can get that power to the tires, to the track, and get out the corner. So for me, I just always run it at 10. I never even touch the damn thing. Don't even touch it. Just leave it. All right? So for these cars, where the sprint cars, we want to max out the tire pressures. For these, we want to have them all the way down, as low as you can get them. 8 in the rear, 10 in the right front, 8 in the left front. That's what I start with on every single late model setup, no matter if it's a pro or a super late model setup. All right. The stagger, anywhere between 4 and 6 inches. Bigger tracks start at 4, smaller tracks start at 6. Like that's pretty much it. The stagger does matter with these cars, but you're not gonna feel it nearly as much as you will with like the sprint car, right? Because you're talking about those things being drastic, the change in the stagger. So Charlotte, I would start, with the track the way it is right now, I would actually increase this to probably like 4.5, just because the track's really fresh right now. But as the night drops down, I would, as the light slicks off, I would drop it to 4, and I probably wouldn't go below 3.5 for the feature. You know what I mean? So the stagger affects these cars, but it's not nearly as much as, something like a sprint car. Now, with the tire pressures actually matter with these cars. So in this little matrix that I've got for you guys here, if I can find it real quick. There we go. So this is the dirt late model setup matrix. And what I did is I went through and put together a couple of different sources, went and got a couple of different sources, and then I tested all of them myself to see if there was actual change, in terms of, what actually helps. We just talked about the axle J bar. I don't touch it. There are situations where you can increase it or decrease it, and the only reason I do that is to control control the rake. You can do that. Like I said, I can do that. I put it on here just for that to be an option for you, because like I said, everyone's different. For me, I just don't mess with it, right? I just don't. But it is on here in case you want. Raising the entire J-bar, that's another option. I don't do that. I've tried it. There is a difference. You can tell a little bit of a difference. So it's on here. So all the stuff that's on here, I've actually personally tested, make sure that it actually does or fixes what it claims to fix, and then put it on here. So if you go to somewhere else like OSR, for example, or even like the little app, right, was that mechanic, dirt track mechanic or something like that, they're going to probably have a whole lot more options, a whole lot more adjustments. Those are two sources that I used. I also have a bunch of stuff that I got from other places online, actual companies and all kinds of stuff. And like I said, I tested all that stuff, left it off. So if it's something you're like, oh man, I don't see that adjustment. It's because I tried it and I didn't think it did anything, or I didn't think it had the correct effect, so I didn't put it on. All right, so I'm just letting you guys know that, so that way you know why there's not something on here if you go somewhere else and look. But back to the tire pressure. Adding 1 pound in the right rear on these cars makes a difference. Adding 2 pounds makes a huge difference. Like, you have a tight race car, you add 1 pound, it'll be comfortable. You add 2 pounds, it's going to be loose. I mean, it can have that kind of effect. So tire pressure is one of those things that's a pretty major adjustment. Okay. When we get over here, a lot of this stuff, it's very intimidating. There's a lot of this stuff that I don't really touch. Okay. Like Packer, I never put shims in these things ever. All right, but get them up on the bars, keep them there, right? I don't mess with them. In fact, I don't think I've ever found a setup from anybody else who has a Packer shim in neither. Maybe they do. I've tried them. I didn't like them, so I just never messed with them. All right. So for me, I just do all the other stuff. Toe in. I always try to keep my toe in between 7/16 and 5/16 on the late models. That's just where I try to keep it. Unlike the sprint cars where you can't really tell the difference, right? You can have that thing maxed out or have it perfectly straight, and it's like, I don't really feel much. Maybe it kind of turns in a little bit better, but not much. With these, it can be an actual adjustment, and you can actually feel it. So I always try to keep it within 5/16 and 7/16 because you want to eliminate as many variables as possible with these cars when it comes to the setups. Because like I said, you can get lost in all of the stuff you can change on these things, and it can be maddening, right? So like the camber, you know, there's a lot of times where it's just like, you know, max it out. You know, a lot of people will do that. They'll just be like, oh, just max it out. Okay. You know, we don't have tire wear. So, you know, you can do that if you want. I don't typically do that. I try to keep it somewhere. The right front, a lot of times I'll put it at, you know, anywhere between, I think the base had it at like 4.7 or 4 something, and then the left was at like 2 something to almost 3. I'll have it at, you know, 4.5 up to 7 depending on the track, and then the left front I'll have it, you know, 2.5 to 4 depending on the track. All that is the tilt of the wheels. The way that camber works is if you have the right front like this, what happens is when the car goes into the corner, that rolls the suspension, and then now you're putting the most amount of contact patch on the dirt. So if we actually look here, let me see, Greg's a good one. Let's go to the rear chase. So see how that left rear tire, or left rear tire, what am I talking about? The right front tire, see how it's like really, see the angle that it's at? That's camber. And so what happens is, and let me back up a little bit. There we go. So what happens is as that thing goes into the corner, see how it's starting to straighten out now and it's matching the angle of the track, matching the bank of the track? That's what camber does. And so you're maximizing your contact patch here. And iRacing does a good job of emulating this, of simulating this. It does matter. All right. If you were to look at, even though we don't have tire wear right now, and I'm hoping that we get that soon. That would be awesome if we got it this build. Your temperatures, you would pay a whole lot more attention to those, because that'll really affect your tire wear if your camber is not correct. That's why I'm showing you guys this stuff now, because if we do get tire wear, if God blesses us with tire wear in this next build, you want to know this, because that's going to have a huge effect. You go burning up this right front tire, the car ain't going to turn. All right, so I mean, it's the same concept like in asphalt as well. So it's all you're doing is you're trying to maximize that contact patch when it's rolled over and you've got the weight on it. So same thing on the left front, it's just the opposite direction because it's shifting weight to the other side. Okay, so that's your camber. I gotta change this back. Okay, so that's your camber. Now, your spring rates, all right, I always start with 500 and 300. Sometimes, you know, I might go 450 and 300, but for the most part, it's 500 on the left front, 300 on the right front. That's basically kind of my starting point. On the rear, 200 and 175. I genuinely, for the front, there's no rule that I have in terms of split. So there might be times where I've got a left front spring that's 600 and a right front that's 150, right? Like Williams Grove, for example, because we've got all that speed, we got all that momentum, and then we got to try to pin that thing down so we can get the thing to rotate at that hairpin turn. So that would be an example of like the extremes. But there's no rule on, you know, keep it in this range. On the rear, I do. I never try to have it split by more than 50. So I might go to 225 on this right rear, but if I need to raise that right rear spring more, I'm going to bring up that left rear, because that's just, for me, that's too much. Now, that's just me, okay? That's my own personal preference. You might find it to be okay, but for me, that's something that I do. I try not to have too much spring split with the car in the rear. Now, with the spring rates, these perch offsets are of critical importance, all right, because that is what's going to adjust your ride height. And the ride heights on these cars is very, very important. If we look back at Greg's car here, and we look at the rear chase, right, and I actually back this up some so we can see it. See how that nose is sealing off there? I mean, it's actually under the dirt there. See how that right side right? See how we've got, I mean, we got the right side valence down, we got the right front down. That's what's giving us the side bite. So when this car goes into the corner aerodynamically, we want that nose sealed off. We want that right side sealed off because that's what's giving us that aerodynamic bite, that side bite in the car. That's critical. You go raising that front end up, it's going to act like a sail, right? Like you got a parachute on your car. You got the front end up, it's going to have air coming up underneath. It's going to literally be lifting up the front end. And it matters. The physics on these late models seem to be a little bit more accurate than the sprint cars in terms of stuff like the aerodynamic stuff mattering a whole lot more. That will make a difference. So you want to make sure that you're keeping that thing sealed off. When you get to a smaller track, it's not near as important because it's more mechanical because you're on and off the throttle so much and the track is so much shorter. But with the bigger tracks, right, you want to make sure that you've got that. You want that air coming over that car, not going under. You want that nose planted. You want that right side down. All right. So when you go making a spring adjustment, you've got to make sure that you readjust this height here. All right. So if I drop this spring down to 200, that ride height, boom, we just dropped way low. Not only that, if we put that back to, what was it, 300? If we look at the valence, right, 9.71 on the left front, I mean it's less than an inch, but on the right side here, right front, we got 9.71. If I drop that down, right, now we're down to 6. We also don't want it digging into the ground, okay? I don't think that they have it to where that slows you down now. I don't think that's an aspect, but if they ever do, have that set up, we don't want to be digging up dirt, all right? So adjust the spring perch to compensate for that. Oops, I went the wrong direction. And get your front end back to where it was. All right, 403, 405, boom. And our left rear bite is good, okay? So always readjust that, all right? Always readjust that. It's critical you do that. Now the shocks, you're going to notice I've got tie-down shocks on the front. When the track is fresh with these things, I actually like to just tie down the front for the reasons that we were just talking about. Aerodynamically, it seems to really help these cars. As the track slicks off, I'll lighten up some rebound. I'll even increase the bump here in the front. But for the most part, when I'm starting off the night, I want that thing tied down because I want the air coming over the top of it. It does make a difference. All right. The shocks are really what the shocks really do is they are critical for your on and off throttle adjustments. So with the late models, you can be loose in the middle, but it depends. Are you loose when you're on or off the throttle? And most of the time, that's going to be a shock adjustment that's going to fix it, as you can see. Right front rebound we would decrease the right front rebound to tighten up the car if we were on throttle, right? For the right rear bump, whether you're on the throttle or off the throttle, right? On the throttle, you're going to increase it. Off the throttle, you're going to decrease it. Okay, so those are the shocks are really your on and off throttle adjustments. That's where those are really going to matter. Your springs are going to really kind of set everything else. One of the reasons why, and I don't get too caught up on the bump here because if I've got a 500-pound spring, right, and a 3 bump, keep in mind that these are coil loafers. So that spring is having a big effect on how much that shock bumps, okay? So it's more or less reacting based on the spring than the shock with a 500. Now over here, that kind of matches pretty well, right? 200 with the 3, like that one's a little bit more in tandem. You also have to consider the fact that on the rebound, the stiffer the spring, that's also going to affect the way that it rebounds. All right? So that's why when I finally figured out kind of a spring and shock package, I kind of stick with it because you can really start messing with stuff. Springs are more of a drastic adjustment. Shocks are more fine-tuning. Okay. The camber and caster, yes, see that this is different. We covered it already, but whenever you change anything, you also have to readjust your caster and camber, which will in turn change your ride heights, which you'll have to readjust. Okay. So with the late models, there's a few things that whenever you change something, you got to go in and recalibrate. Caster and camber, ride heights, and also your axle lead. Those things will change when you adjust other things. Okay. And caster, really, that's the angle of the wheel. Um, the explanation that iRacing has here it's good. It does a good job. More positive camber, more oversteer while steering wheel is turned into a corner, more understeer when counter steering in a slide. It also will add a heavier feel to the wheel. I try to keep my caster at 4 on the right front and 2 on the left front just because that's what feels good to me and that's the way that I just try to keep it. I have not found that changing the caster affects speed in any way. It's more of a comfort thing for me. So that's what I do. Okay. Um, Now the rear springs, we talked about springs already. It's the same thing. This rear end right now is not bad because the track is fresh. But as this slicks off, we want to raise this higher. We want that ride height to be much higher because we want this deck height to be as close to 39 as we can get it. All right. I'm gonna make some adjustments for these guys here in just a second. Left rear shock. This is something that's important. These things, the opposite of sprint cars. So we don't want these things tied down. We want the bump maxed out and the rebound at 2. I will basically run a 9.2 on the left rear of a late model at all times. Rarely I will increase the rebound to 3, but for the most part it's a 9.2 on that shock. Right shock will be a 5/5 almost 9 times out of 10 as well. So those I actually don't play with as much. I will adjust the front end on these cars actually more than I will the rear end. Now the trailing arms, understand those things have a cost to them. If you adjust the trailing arm, right? Let's say you are tight on corner entry, so you want to, adjust the right rear upper trailing arm to loosen up your entry. That's great, but it's going to affect your exit. So anytime you adjust one of these trailing arms, it will affect the opposite end of the corner. It just will. So I always try to once I find an angle that feels good, and for me this is where I always start, 22 and 20. I try to keep them there. I might move them up together or down together because that will offset each other. But I try not to just change one because it can have a drastic effect unless I need to fix my entry and exit, right? Let's say my car's tight on entry and loose on exit. Well, then I'll adjust my trailing arm because that'll fix both of them, right? So that's one of the things that you need to know about the trailing arm. Ballast, this is just weight that's in the car. I always run this at either -16 or -11. 9 times out of 10, I'll have it at -16. It's just where the weight is. I try to run it as far, -16 is back. I try to run it as far back as I can. That keeps the weight on the rear, gives me the most drive. There will be situations though where I will move it forward. It's rare, but I will. Axle J-bar, we already talked about. Chassis J-bar, it's just the J-bar. That's just where it connects. I will adjust this up and down some to provide more rake. Once again, the explanation that they've got here is spot on. It just helps. It's just more roll angle. Droop chain, I always leave it at 24.5 unless the track starts to really get slicked off, and then I'll raise it up some just to give the car some more roll. Okay, that's pretty much it. Now, axle lead. All right, axle lead actually leads the axle, and so that will affect the entire corner. Try, when the track is fresh, keep it at 0. All right. plus or minus 1/16 on either way. So you can go plus 1/16 or minus 1/16, but try to keep it in that 0 range. Now, when the track starts to get slick, axle lead can actually help you in terms of keeping the car from rotating too much, as the track is slicked off. And so a lot of times I'll actually adjust that. All right. And you can see here where the explanation on this is right. Positive lead leads the right rear tire, adds understeer. Negative lead leads the left rear tire, adds oversteer. So, playing with this on your setup, when the track slicks off, it's one of those things that even though this says it adds understeer, adds oversteer, for you it might feel better to be positive 2/16 on a slick track than to be negative 2/16. All right, it's one of those things that you want to kind of test out and have a feel for. Like I said, I try to keep, whoops, I went the wrong way. I try to keep it as close to straight as I can. Only rare situations do I adjust it, because that will affect you throughout the entire corner. Okay? So before I start having these guys tell me some stuff and we do some adjustments, do you guys got any questions? Yes, the video will be up. It's going to be on here. It's going to be here on YouTube, man. I'm not going to be taking it down. So it will be left up here. Let's see. Left front all the way down and right front all the way up. Would that work too? No. No, because if you move the right front all the way up, that means the car's got to roll over that much more to seal that up. The aerodynamics really matter on these late models. It really makes a difference. So you want to seal that right side off to help you get that side bite. Okay? All right, first up here. All right, Greg, you in here? All right, good. How's the car feel? I'm going to make some adjustments on all your guys' stuff. Okay. All right, let me adjust this then. Okay, so with he's saying that the car's because the track's starting to slick off now. Track's over rotating on the entry, and as he goes through the turn, it's basically maintaining that it's not wanting to straighten out and drive out straight. He's having to really turn it. All right. So this is one of those situations where basically he's loose all the way through. Okay. So if we look at that, right, where we've got loose throughout, we can decrease the tire pressure. Well, we can't. We're already as low as we can go. We can increase the axle lead. That is something that we can do. Now, I'm not going to go that route, okay? That, like I said, that's one of those things that I don't want to do that yet. So what I'm going to look at is I'm going to look at more of the entry aspect of it, okay? So for him, one of the things that I know works really, really good is dropping the right front spring as the track starts to slicken off. Okay, and then increasing the left front spring, also increasing the chassis J-bar. All right. So what we'll do here is we're going to drop this down to 175, and I'm going to increase this to 525. All right. Let me preface by saying don't do that. Okay. Never stack adjustments. Always do one adjustment at a time. Please keep in mind I'm doing this to save us time. I don't want to have him go out, turn laps, and then say, well, that helped some, but now I need more. I'm kind of fast tracking this, so please understand when you're doing this, make one adjustment at a time. All right. And then we got to reset the ride height here. Now, One thing that happened is that even though we made that change, our left rear bite went down. So as the track slicks off, you want more left rear bite. Left rear bite is just cross weight, like we talked about with the sprint cars. So what we're going to do is, because here on the rear end, I want this rear end to be higher. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually raise this rear end up, get him some more aerodynamic bite in the rear, while also increasing that crossweight, that left rear bite. See how we're starting to flash yellow? That's what I want. 38 or 39 is the max that you can go. 214 pounds is pretty good for that left rear bite. Now, here in the right front, we're at the minimum. I want to actually, there we go. I want to have that be a little bit more even. 220 is a little much. Let's drop that down. 217, that's good. And now I got to fix my axle lead, because we're way too much in the negative. All right, so we're at 217. We got our ride heights where we want them. Our deck height is high. That's what I want. All right, so now we're going to save this. And I'm going to share this with Greg. All right, Greg, I just shared that setup with you. Give that a shot and see. All right, up next, let's see here. Wow, Bruce, Devin, Michael, you guys are doing good, man. You guys are all running the same speeds. All right, so who's next on the list? Michael. All right, Michael, you in here? All right, so how's the car feel? Okay. So yours is mostly on entry. All right. Okay, so let me put the base back on here. So Michael's is mostly on the entry, right? So where Greg's was all the way through, Mike's is mostly on the entry. So basically that's what we're going to focus on, is the entry. Now, like I said, when we looked at Greg's and I did the adjustments, I took loose on entry corrections and then I added left rear bite to compensate for that on the exit. That was how I did that, okay? Like I said though, don't stack adjustments, all right? I'm doing this from an insane amount of experience testing, okay? When you're first doing this stuff, just do one at a time, all right? So for Mike, really we want to focus more on just the entry. And so instead of looking at a handful of adjustments, we could just do one. My go-to for that situation is going to be the right front spring, right? His was at 300. We could drop it down probably to 200. The only reason I'm going 100 pounds is because the track is changing so much, so that's why I would drop it down 100. Normally, if I was looking at the track state being relatively the same, or just myself testing and I'm trying to build a setup, I would never go more than 50 pounds. But in this situation, we can go down to 200 because the track is slicking off so much. So we're going to put the ride height back up where it needs to go. Okay, we've got our left rear bite is still pretty good. We can raise up his rear end now just because the track is slicking off more. Like I said, we want to have the nose down and the back up. When you're doing this, do it evenly. I know it's tedious, but do it evenly so you don't jack up one side too much over the other. I try to keep these ride heights in the rear relatively close. I know there's people out there who say you can add rake and stuff like that. I don't try to do that. I try to keep it more close. Whoops. And then here on the lead, we're going to reset that. Make sure we're good everywhere else for tech. And there we go. All right, so make that one for Mike. All right, Mike, I just shared that with you. So give that a shot. All right, next. Let's see here. All right, Bruce, you there? All right, so all right, so Bruce is saying his is driving, but we can still help him. Okay. So, what we're going to do with Bruce here is I'm going to actually do axle lead with Bruce. Now, the reason I'm going to do some axle lead with Bruce is because this is to help him more get the car underneath him, because Bruce is not as experienced in the late models. I think you can probably count on one hand how many times he's driven them. The fact that he's doing as well as he is really a testament to his skill. So we're gonna actually do what we're gonna take Mike's setup, but I'm gonna actually just add some axle lead to it. All right. And I'm not gonna add more left rear bite to his car, just because the left rear bite, since he's a newer driver, is a really hard thing when in the beginning. All right. So doing this axle lead is gonna hopefully help with that, along with that spring adjustment that we've done for him. Okay, you guys, I hope you're paying attention here. We're not doing crazy wholesale changes. You can see here the casters got reset. I got to fix that. Let me save that again. There we go. All right. But you guys can see I'm not going out and making crazy changes, man. It's just a couple of things like here, here, here. All right. We don't need to change everything. Once you have a good base setup, and I'm giving you guys a good base setup, it's all a matter of just getting that thing dialed in for you. All right, Bruce, I just shared that with you. All right, Devin, you're up. What do you got, man? Okay, so loose on entry and then tight on exit. All right. So, Devin's setup. Let me put the base back on here. Devin's is more because he wants the car to be on the bottom. Now, this is actually pretty cool, because what we can do for him is he is more loose on entry, tight on exit, wants the car to get down and roll over. So that's something that we can actually do. Increasing the droop will help with that some. Also, what we can do is just we're going to soften that up a little bit and increase that a little bit, though it's slight changes. And that's more staying ahead of the track as opposed to trying to fix this problem, because where I'm really going to fix it is going to be here. So, Devin, did you say it was loose on entry but tolerable? But it's not getting down to the bottom like you want it to? Okay. So his is just wanting to shoot straight to the wall. All right. So this is a situation where when your car's wanting to shoot to the wall like that, yes, that's left rear bite, but you don't want to take out a bunch of left rear bite because that affects your drive. Where that really can matter is if we're tight in the middle on the throttle, right? We've already got the right front shock tied all the way down, but the left front rebound, we can decrease that, okay? Because what that's going to do is that's going to allow more of that weight to shift to the right side, so the right side gets more dynamic weight shifted to it and drives off. So it'll be more of an even drive as opposed to it wanting to shoot to the wall. So we don't need to change the left rear bite. We can just actually take some of this out. And that should be, I do want to raise this up the rear because like I said, the track is slicking off. We want to have that rear up. Then we got to re-square this rear end. Always remember to re-square the rear end. And bum, bum, bum. Okay. All right, Devin, I just shared that with you. Try it. All right, so let's ask these guys. All right, Greg, how does that setup feel? Okay. Uh-huh. Okay. So, yeah, decrease your left front rebound to 5. So what? Yeah, yeah. So Greg's setup, he said after those adjustments, it feels good. It's just a little bit where I don't know if you guys could hear him or not. Probably not. But he says the setup feels good, and it's just on the exit, it's wanting to push a little bit towards the wall. That's a fine tune. So we would do that with the shock. And so same thing like we did with Devin, where we're going to take out some rebounds so that right rear gets some more weight and drive. Now it'll rotate more because of the weight and go. Always remember with the weight, you guys, a lot of people think that the car will spin because it doesn't have any weight. It doesn't have any bite. That's not the case. When you're in the slick, you're in the slick. I don't care what your setup is, you're going to spin. But when the car is actually gripping the track, if you have too much bite, right, on one wheel over the other, that can cause that shift. And so where we've got the left rear bite wound up into these cars so high, 200 pounds, 210 pounds, because that's really what makes these things go, especially on the big tracks. We've got to counteract that with the dynamic weight. That's where the shocks come in. All right. And so allowing that rebound to come up when he's getting back onto the throttle, because these things you got to really work the throttle. When you get back onto that throttle and that weight shifts to the rear, now we're getting more shifting and faster from that left front to the right rear. So now that thing can drive off straighter. All right. All right. Michael, how's your setup feel? Michael wants a sprint car back. Well, don't worry, man. We're almost done with these things. So the last couple cars, I'm just gonna do, you guys. I'm just gonna do myself in a test session by myself because we're gonna go through those pretty quickly. But these are the sprint cars, late models are the ones I wanted help with. So you want your sprint car back? Well, how does the setup feel? How did the adjustments feel? Did they actually help? Okay. Bruce, how about you? Yeah. And so Bruce is saying that it feels much better all the way through. In the middle, he's feeling a kind of bit where it's wanting to get loose. That would be a on throttle, off throttle adjustment in the middle. Um, Once again, shock adjustment, and you would just make a small shock adjustment, and you would be good to go, right? Like that would probably fix the problem. Devin, what about you? And so Devin says his fix the problems. Car feels great. He said you go with the gear change. Um, the gear you would want to fine tune. That is something to keep in mind with these cars. On the sprint cars, for example, and we'll look at iRacing setup real quick. So iRacing has a 469. Keep in mind, this is a feature setup. When I'm running a qualifying setup at Charlotte, I'm running like a 481 or a 487. So these cars, even with the pro late models, as the track slicks off, you're gonna go to a taller gear because the wheel spin on these things can be insane. Okay, and even though you're working the throttle like crazy, since especially these super late, since they've got so much power, that gear is gonna really make a difference. Even on the pro late models, you're gonna be working the throttle as the track slicks off. That gear is gonna make a difference. So keep that in mind. You're gonna want to be dropping. You're going to a taller gear. I always say drop because it's a smaller number, but you're going to want to go to a taller gear as the night, as the track slicks off. All right, you guys. So that's going to do it for the late models. Keep in mind, everything I just told you is the same for super lates as it is for pros. Okay. So does anybody have any questions before we hop over? We're going to look at the UMP mods next. Anybody got any questions? Yeah, what's up? Um, I I don't know if I would do that, but that's I wouldn't try that. No, not at all. So yeah, no, yeah, no problem. So Devin was asking. He's heard people say stiffen up the left front spring and then run 150s all the way around. No, I haven't heard that. I'm not saying that that's not a thing. I wouldn't even try that, but that's just me. So what are you gonna do? Yeah, I wouldn't mess with it. All right, you guys. I'm gonna bounce out. I'm gonna do the UMPs by myself real quick, you guys, because it's not gonna take very long, and I'm sure you do. But I'm just gonna do a test session and kind of go through them real quick because there are actually a lot of similarities. And my wife was just calling me, and so I need to wrap this up. So, because happy wife, happy life. So, yeah. All right. So now, you guys, for the non-wing sprint cars, like I said, you're going to go through the same process like you would go through with the wing sprint cars for setting them up. That's why I'm not going to show them to you guys. Um, if you want, I've got all the setups for free and stuff like that. You can go get them from the Discord. You know what I mean? But it's the same adjustments and stuff like that. The only thing that's reversed is for the non-wings, you go keep them low, especially the front end when the track is fresh, raise it up as the track slicks off, and that's the opposite of the winged cars. So, uh, dirt UMPs. No, not Eldora. So I'm gonna give you guys are gonna also get my UMP base setup. This is the same setup I use I build from every single track. The physics of the UMPs are very similar to a late model. It's just the numbers that you're using are a little bit different. All right. And I need to all right, so I'm going to put this into, whoops. I'm going to load up, I'm going to put this into my Google Drive real quick for you guys so you guys can get this down. I'm going to put the link into the comments right now. It's just a practice session, yeah. I'm just going to do a practice one. Oh, I just use the default weather all the time. So I always just use the 78 degrees, 55% humidity, and 2 mile per hour winds from the north. That's what I always use because I try to keep things controlled. So because I'm basically comparing myself against myself when I'm creating a setup. So that's another thing, you guys, when you're doing that, when you're testing and building setups, don't get caught up in um trying to compare your times to other drivers. Like I will go look at, the results from the current series and stuff like that just to see that I'm on par with them. But if I'm a tenth or two off, I don't care because that can be weather. That, you know what I mean? You always want to make sure that you're using the same weather all the time for your testing, right? Your track states are remaining consistent in terms of when you test your qualifying or your feature or that type of stuff, because that's what's going to give you the best results. Because if I do a test session and it's 66 degrees and then I do another one and it's 78, that difference in weather can be huge in terms of speed. It really can. So you want to make sure that you're doing it consistently. All right. So here is the setup workshop folder. All right, there's the link. I just posted it in the comments. I don't know. I don't think I can pin it, but there it is. It's in the comments. Like I said, if you're watching the recording of this, it'll be down in the description. All right. I will also post this um, in the. Hey Bruce, I'm gonna send this link to you. Can you post it in the free setup section? Thank you. If I can even find. There we go. All right. Thank you very much, man. All right. So UMP mods. I've got my SSR setup baseline. This is the one I build all of my setups from with these. The tire pressures on these, I will actually adjust these things. I start off with 10 on the right, 8 on the left front, and 9 on the left rear. I will actually play with these tire pressures a little bit more. The reason is these cars have a lot of power and very narrow tires. So their horsepower is almost on par with the super lates, but the tires are a fraction of the size, right? So that has a huge effect on the way the car feels and the handling. This has just always been a good starting point for me. Same thing with the stagger, right? I just go half inch in the front, half inch in the rear for my starting point. Now, one thing I will say is always a must with these cars is you want to have the max left rear bite that you can get at all times. I have never found a situation where I want less left rear bite. The most you can have is 149. I believe it's 149. Yeah, 149 is the most you can have, or 150, I think. I always try to be at that max. Okay, that's what I always try to do. Um, what I will do with these is I will find out the gear that's recommended for that track. We have a 504 here. All right. And the toe in, once again, this thing, I actually will keep it between -3 and 0. All right. Like that, the toe in kind of matters with these. Um, the the springs and all that stuff, it's all the same concepts as the late models. The only difference is the numbers. So with these front shocks, I will have the bump a little bit stiffer than the late models, but I will also have them tied down some. Not as extreme, but I will. The right front spring on this, I've got it a 525. Here we run a much stiffer right front spring than the super lates or any late model. Here we've actually got the right front spring stiffer than the left, and that's usually, I try to keep about a 25-pound split. That's what I try to keep on the front. On the rear, I try to keep anywhere between 100 to 75-pound split, where I want the right rear stiffer than the left rear. All right, so those are kind of the guidelines that I go through. And then the wheel spacing, that's the other difference with these cars, is you can actually move the wheels in and out. The wheel spacing will have a very big effect on how the car feels. It will definitely have effect on how the car feels. Okay, so walk you guys through this real quick, because remember, it's the same concept. Oops, why can't I hear it? Oh, I turned the sound down. That's right. Forgot about that. So it's the same, like I said, same concept as the late models in terms of how things work, the physics of it. It's just a different, I guess I should put it in gear. It's just a different number, all right? So with these, we got to get them over on that right side, and it's all throttle control. And the first thing that I want to change with this thing is the gear, because it's not winding up like I want it to. I like my cars to really wind out. So that's not doing what I want. Also, the car feels loose on entry, okay? And if we bring up our little matrix here, right, you're going to see this looks very similar to the super late one, all right? In terms of the things that we're going to adjust. Once again, these cars are very temperamental on the middle of the corner adjustment in terms of on and off the throttle, all right? So this right now, the car is just loose on entry. For me, it's wheel spacing. I almost always will start with the wheel spacing, because that can actually have a huge effect. Also, tire pressures. So I would actually drop the right rear down a pound, and I would bring in this right rear a half an inch. All right. Once I do that, you can see I need to readjust my left rear bite. And then I also want to go to a little bit taller gear here. Okay. And then that's it. Go out and do the same thing. And you can see just by those little adjustments how much better the car looks. Right, I'm not over rotating on the entry. The car's not over rotating throughout the corner. I just crossed it up there and bogged it down, but it can run up high or down low. And I would run this setup right now at Charlotte. Like, I would be comfortable racing this setup the way it is in an official race at Charlotte. Perfectly comfortable with it. What you'll find with these cars, what I have found with these cars, is the tire pressure, the wheel spacing really can solve a lot of problems if you have a good base setup. This base setup that I'm giving you works, and it works. I've tried it at every track. It works, and it works well. And then it's just a matter of fine tuning. Once again, you're going to go through the same exact process like we talked about with the sprint cars and the super lates, right? If it's loose on entry, what did I do? Right? I moved in the right rear, right? Because the right rear is what gets us in. That's what I started with. Okay. Um, it's it's that same step-by-step process that we're going to go through. If my car was still loose on entry, okay, I might look at my right rear spring, but you can see here I've got a little note, can loosen you on the exit. See, some of these adjustments, right? See, decrease the tire pressure, that can tighten throughout the corner. I needed that, so that's why I did that along with the right rear wheel spacing. So I would actually go up, if my car was still loose, I would increase the right front wheel spacing because there's no trade-off with that. That's not going to, affect my exit or anything like that. So the wheel spacing on these cars, although they're small adjustments, can have huge effects. Really can. Once you have a spring and shock package that feels pretty good. And then when you're in the middle, from the middle out, on and off the throttle, you're really going to dial those in with these shock adjustments. There's a couple of things, that might be able to do it as well, spring adjustment, but for the most part, you're really going to fine tune it with the shocks when we're talking about on and off the throttle. Okay, that's really it with these cars. The base setup, like I said, it'll work at this works at every track. This is the setup that I hopped. What was it? It's like 2 months ago. I was doing a live stream. I hopped in on a live stream and I was like, hey, let's do a UMP race at Eldora, right? I had never done an official race in these cars. I had only ever even entered into one and I chickened out and left. I'd only done some practice races in these cars. I had never done a real race. I went out and I was like, oh, I'll just kind of qualify towards the back and see what happens. I set fast time and I won the feature, led every lap with this setup. I took this setup, ran it at Knoxville with a couple of little tweaks, finished like top 3. I gave this setup to other drivers who are UMP drivers. They're like, dude, this thing is awesome. So the setup is pretty much there. You're just going to dial it in for you. Okay? And in terms of, well, what do I do if the track starts to slick off? Soften the rear springs. It's the same concepts that we would use for the late models, right? You soften up the right front, you can soften up the rear, right? The aerodynamics don't matter as much with these cars as they do with the late models, but keep that left rear by. That's really it. Your wheel spacing and your throttle control, your tire pressure, those things are really what's going to separate you with these cars. And then in extreme situations, if you're like loose in and tied off or something, you can start kind of tinkering with these trailing arms. But I would really stay away from that if you don't have to mess with them. Okay. And you guys, I know that's fast with these, but that's really it with the UMPs. It is. Once you have a good base setup, and this is a good base setup, man, you're good. You really are. You're good at every track. It's just fine tuning that thing for you. And with that matrix, it'll definitely get you there if you walk through those steps like I talked about. All right. So you guys have any questions on these things before we wrap this up? Yes, that is the base that I gave you is the base for the 360s and the 410s. That is the base setup. When the track slicks off, I find with the 410s, I can run it a little bit lower than the 360s. The 360s seem to be heavier, so they seem to bottom out more. So I might raise them up a little bit more, but it's not much. And really quick, so let me show you guys this real quick. This is what I'll be my last thing that I show you guys before we wrap up. So I have a lot of people who've asked me, Tommy, how do you build the setup for a long run? Okay, and I don't know why I'm doing that because I just want the garage. So this is how I do it. First, with all the testing and all the calculations and all the stuff that I've figured out, all right, the way is from as far as I can tell, and keep in mind this could all change when they do the new build. I hope they bring tire wear and somehow don't change anything else. Um, but in terms of the way the track wears, right, the track state, from all the math and everything that I have done, one car per lap will increase the track state between 0.1 and 0.2%. All right. So if you're by yourself and you do 10 laps, you have increased the track state by either 1 or 2%. That variable, that difference between that 0.1 and 0.2 is based on factors like the weather, okay, and the car, right? So from the way I see things, like sprint cars seem to blow the track off more than midgets, okay? So that's that variable. So what you need to do is start getting good at seeing what percentage the track is. So in iRacing, when you enter into an official race, it doesn't give you a percentage. It'll say practice has slight usage. Well, slight usage is basically like 5% to like 15%. I can't remember exactly. Okay. So once you figure out the starting point, then you can start just doing some simple math. Well, if there's 20 cars and each car did X amount of laps in practice, and if I use this little calculation, that means that after practice, the track should be at 15%. And then after qualifying, it should be, 16% or whatever. And then after the first heat race, it should be 25%. And after the second, it should be 35%. And then by the time we get to the feature, it should be 65%, right? Like that's how you can figure that. That's how I figure that out. Okay, so that's the exact formula, the exact calculation that I use to figure out the track percentages, the track states for the Insider program, for my own personal setups. And when I build the setups and then I go out and I actually run official races with them and stuff like that, okay, if things don't feel right, there's times where I'll be like, hey, do this to the setup, or hey, do this to the setup, in terms of staying ahead of the track. If it's something built for me, I don't share that because it's not going to help people. But when in terms of it's just like staying ahead of the track, those are things I'm like, hey man, increase the wing angle to 30 degrees instead of 27 because the track seems to be slicked off more this week for whatever reason. All right. So that's the first thing that I do. So I need to know what's the track going to start at and what's it roughly going to end at. All right. Almost always in an official race, the track is going to start somewhere between 50 and 60, maybe 65%. It's going to end somewhere between 90 and 110%, right? Like, I mean, that's pretty much where it's been. It's been, with the wing sprint cars. So for me, I find that my car feels the best on a slick track when I am operating at a ride height that is somewhere between 12 and a half, 12.5 to maybe 12.7 on the left rear, maybe up to 13 on a bigger track, and then on the right rear, 13.75 to 14.3, somewhere in that range, right? Smaller track to bigger track. So that's the range that I kind of look at. So for example, if let's say I'm going to build this feature setup. How much fuel do I need for a 360A main here? Well, let's look at what does iRacing recommend? 19 gallons. So we're going to go back here to the base, and I'm going to put in 10 gallons, which is basically halfway. All right. And if I want my ride height to be in that range, this is the way that I do it. So first of all, I want to get my corner weights calculated correctly here. So now I've got those even. So now what I'm going to do is now I'm going to set my ride height. Okay. So I'm going to raise that up, raise that up, raise it, raise, and right there, boom, 14 on the right rear, 12.5 on the left rear. We're good. Okay, got my ride height. I wouldn't have my wheel spacing there, but we're talking about the ride heights. So now I've got my ride height where I want it for half my fuel. Now I add in the rest of my fuel, hit apply. That's how I build a setup for a long run. You can see this car right now with the fuel got 495 on the right rear, 487, a little bit more right rear dominant. As this fuel burns off, we get closer. Still right rear dominant, but it gets closer, right? So that's how I build a setup. That ride height thing in the rear, that there's no hard and fast rule for that, you guys. Understand that. Like I said, there are some drivers who like their cars much lower than other drivers. There are some drivers who like their cars to lean a whole lot more than other drivers. And you can accomplish that whatever in any way that you see fit, as long as it feels comfortable for you. Once we get past that, like I said, that 40 to 50% track state, man, with these sprint cars and stuff, in terms of your setup, the world really opens up. I'm starting to see why these pros like the slick track so much. Part of it is because they just know that everybody else doesn't like them and doesn't run them, and they've got an advantage. I mean, part of it is that, but a lot of it, I think, has to do with the fact that they know that their stuff is built for that, and they're going to do good in it. What do you do if the car feels good on handling, but if you're too slow? Is that just learning to drive better, or is there an adjustment that you know what, Jason? In terms of the late models, and in terms of the mods, I have not found anything like with the sprint cars where when the track's fresh you can raise up the front end and that'll increase your speed. I have not found anything with those cars that has that effect. That does not mean there's not something out there, but I have not found anything. I have not personally discovered anything that will do that. Other than like the aerodynamics, that seems to be the one thing. If you get that nose down and the rear up, that seemed to be the one thing that helped with speed. Um, Let me see here. Midget base setup. Oh, you want a midget base setup? I'll give you a midget base setup. Where is it at? Right here. Triple X. Midgets are actually very, very close to real life on this game. Um, I have a 185 spring on the right front, a 175 on the left front. I just go 800 bars across the rear with a straight four shock, and then a 3.7 or 3.8 or 3.9 on the left rear. And then the front end, I set it at like 4, and then the rear, I drop it down. But I mean, that's really it. That's really it with these things. With the midgets for the base setup, and you guys, here's the thing: if you haven't gone to SSR and downloaded all the free setups, especially for like the midgets, go do that. I mean, really go do that, because those things that'll help you much more than my base. Because that base setup that I just brought up right there, like that's one that I'll use a lot of times to start with. But there are with the midgets, and because I have a ton of experience with those, both real and sim, a lot of that stuff is in my head. I just do that on the fly. I do not save those base setups like that. That's why I say go get the ones that I've built for the tracks and then adjust those with those. But it's the same, you guys. It's the same concept. I mean, it's literally that open wheel setup matrix. It's the same for midgets, for sprint cars, non-wing and winged. It really is. And with the midgets, there's uh oh crap, where did that thing go? Open wheel. With the midgets, really, those things, if you stay, 775 to 800 bars, maybe 8 1/4. I mean, I run 775s across the back or 800s across the back, like 80% of the time. Occasionally, I might split it, add some tilt or reverse split. But I mean, that's more of a comfort thing than a speed thing. It really is. I've seen, when we ran the midget league this year, there were people. They had a wide variety of setups. I mean, the midgets are, to me, those are the closest things to real life on the sim in terms of the setups. Because those things, it's make them comfortable for you. Whatever's comfortable for you, and you're good to where you can drive them. Like Bruce, for example, like he a lot of my setups in the midgets, like he modifies them to fit him. Dude, I mean, he is just as fast, if not faster than me on a lot of the tracks now. So, those things are, it's really just a matter of getting that thing dialed in for you, right? Because there is no hard and fast with those midgets. There is no hard and fast rule. You can run the front end all the way up. You can run it all the way down. It whatever whatever feels good to you. I normally start with it in kind of in the middle, and I raise it up as the night, slicks off. Get more weight on the rear. I mean, that's really it with those. So yeah, there's not a base one in here because that triple X one online is, I mean, it really is a starting point. Those say 4.1 and 4.2 on the shocks. iRacing shocks don't go to that point, but I mean that's a good place. Another one, and I found this because this was something when I used to work on midgets years and years ago. If you go look this up online, I'm gonna find the picture of it, but it's with all my stuff. Where's it? Oh, here we go. Eagle Racing. These are very close to real life setups too. Whoops, right here. I I built my base setups off of not this exactly, but one that was really close to this, what we did in real life, and was surprised when it worked. I was like, oh wow, this stuff works on these cars. The stagger, not near, you don't do this, the stagger, but in terms of like the springs and the bars, yeah, I mean, it's basically it. You know, ride heights on the midgets. We never really like we just blocked them, and we never did like measurements. We would like look at it and we'd be like, that arm should be pointing down a little bit more. That's Jackson waiting to it. Like that's all we did with those. So the midgets are a lot more open. It's really just a matter of comfort. There's a lot of people that I know who are very fast drivers. Are like, yeah, I just run the base setup that iRacing gives us. Just change the fuel. So those things are really more like the Wild West. So if you are really wanting to do the midgets, that's why I didn't really get into them. I'd said that I was going to cover all cars, and I'm sorry I shouldn't have included the midgets, because those things, if you really want to get into those, get into SSR, get all those setups, and then go watch the training stuff that we've got on them. The videos and stuff. And then if you want to, if you have questions, just ask me, and I'll gladly tell you, because those things are a lot more just wide open. And like I said, these things, the adjustments here will work for those cars. They'll work great. Follow the same process and you'll be good. Look, that's how all these guys in SSR have done it. I mean, those of you who are just new and stuff, but the ones that have been around a while, and a lot of them, dude, a lot of them are kicking my ass now. Like, I mean, let's be honest here. I think guys been helping people. They're all faster than me now. You know what I mean? Doing the stuff that I told them. So it works. It really works following this process. It does. Rebound and bump with the midgets is the exact same. It's the exact same as the sprint cars. Yep. I mean, it's the exact same. The only difference is that on like the midgets, I would run like a straight 4 shock instead of a straight 5 shock. Because the midgets roll, they have a little bit more roll in them than like even the non-wing sprint cars, and they're lighter, so you don't need the stiffer shock. But that's it. I mean, that's really it. And you can adjust those shocks even if you're like, oh, I'm gonna put a 5 on there. Go ahead, it'll work. I run 5s on there all the time. Yeah. So But yeah, that setup, I mean that base midget setup, and I already loaded that thing up. But here, I'll show you guys real quick. Let me show you my midget setup real quick. The one I start with, because I can do it off the. I can put that on here with my eyes closed. I know it so well. Okay, there you go. I don't know if you guys could hear Greg, but Greg said, "Do what Tommy says, and it'll pay off in the long run." I don't think they can hear you, Greg, but yeah, yeah. You need to record that for me, Greg, so I can so I can All right, my wife's asking for me. I gotta go. All right, so here's the deal. I always start off with 5 inches of stagger. Shorter tracks go up, smaller tracks go down. Okay. Tire pressure, same thing. Max them all out. The left front, I'll tweak every now and then. That's so minor. If you left it at 10, 11, or 12, you're probably not going to notice a difference. Same thing as the sprint cars. I run the stagger in the front because of the crossway. It's the same concept. Here is my base chassis setup. Front toe, I always try to keep it 5/16 or 6/16. We're going to go on the shock collar, 4 and 4, 185, 175. In the rear, 800s. Drop it all the way down to -3s. Fuel was whatever that is. Shock, 4 bump, 4 rebound. Left rear, 3.9. Wheel spacing, left rear all the way in. Right rear, 19. Shock up here, 4.3, 3.4. That's my base setup that I built every midget setup from. Every single midget setup comes from that base right there. Every single one. All right. And if, as the night goes on, I'll raise the front end up, usually, 3/8 to half an inch. I'll use that as my way for my cross weight. Smaller tracks, less cross weight. Bigger tracks, more cross weight. I mean, it's pretty simple. Smaller tracks, I try to be, lower than 48%. Bigger tracks, I want to be above 48%. I'll increase some rebound, let out some rebound, move the right rear in. I mean, and that's literally it with these things. I mean, that really is. And you'll be good. You will be good. All right. So, you guys, that's going to do it. I'm going to get going. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I really do. I hope it helped. If you guys have any questions or anything like that, you can find me and hit me up in the Discord. All right. Or, I mean, not only me, but there's a ton of people in there that'll answer questions, help you guys out. I mean, it definitely. So, that's going to do it. Thank you guys very much as always. Until next time, good luck, good racing. Take care.